Hello, I'm Jordan. I'm here with my partner Sophia to discuss two logical fallacies. Up first is Sophia with the red herring fallacy.
The red herring fallacy is a very common logical fallacy named after the process of dragging a strong-smelling smoked fish across a trail to confuse hunting dogs. The red herring fallacy occurs when a different unrelated topic is brought up to divert attention away from the original point that was being made or a question that was being asked. It can be used intentionally to try to avoid addressing the main point or to mislead an audience. Politicians use this tactic often to avoid being subject to lines of questioning that are potentially damaging for their popularity or for their public image. An example of a red herring being used in a more common everyday personal argument would be if one person says, "You didn't take care of your clothes this morning like I asked you to," and the other person goes, "Yeah, well, you lied to me yesterday and told me that you didn't eat the food I bought for myself." Using a red herring like that one doesn't make for a valid argument because it avoids addressing the original point that was being made altogether and moves to something unrelated. This is usually because the person using the red herring doesn't want to take responsibility for their actions, or they don't have a valid defense to use. And like I said earlier, politicians use this often to avoid looking bad. An example of this would be if you were watching a political debate and a candidate was asked a question like, "What's your plan to help save the environment?" And the politician says, "I have a solid plan to help the environment, and I also have a plan to help stop inflation," and then they just start talking about their plan for inflation and never again address the plan about the environment. This avoids answering the question entirely, and it effectively distracts the listener from the original question because before you realize what they're doing, they're talking about something completely different.
The begging the question fallacy is also called the circular argument fallacy because it uses circular reasoning. In essence, this translates to, this claim is true because this claim is true. I'll show you. Here you can see we have our claim and the evidence is just the claim itself. Now you might hear the phrase begging the question and think that this is going to lead to further productive questions and conversation, but no, these are fallacies. The only question being begged is this claim actually true? This is where the fallacy fails. The claim is only an assumption that's justified with nothing other than the assumption itself. That would be like if you're defining a word and you use that word in the definition. Imagine you don't know what the word hypothetical means. This is a hypothetical. So if you don't know what the word hypothetical means, and I define it for you as hypotheticals are things that are hypothetical, tell me what hypothetical means. I'm guessing you can't. Well, it's the same thing for logic. Something isn't true just because it's true. There can be some exceptions to this fallacy, whereas if we're talking about a scientifically proven fact, let's say I was to say, we need water because our bodies need water to function. That is in essence saying we need water because we need water, and therefore would fall into the fallacy. But it's been scientifically proven that we need water to function, so it's kind of like an exception here. Anyway, this fallacy could be hard to spot because it's called an informal logical fallacy. These are logically valid but trivial because they fail to actually prove anything. Like, let's say you look at them, it'll look correct. But if you look at the evidence and actually think about it, it's not correct. These could be harder to spot, so let's have some examples. This could be a common one in real life. Any argument saying we should do this because it's cool follows the circular argument fallacy because the reason given for doing it is its coolness, but we do nothing to prove that. Instead, if you were to say, we should do this because everyone else is doing it, which makes it cool, it's popular, that would be a valid argument, but maybe not a good idea. Another example of this argument is the statement, I am an expert on geometry because I wrote an accurate paper about geometry. On the surface, this might seem correct and it does follow logic, but as with informal logical fallacies, the error lies in the evidence. In this instance, me being an expert on geometry is proven by and relies on the fact that the paper I wrote is accurate. Yet I wrote this paper, so for it to be accurate, I would have to be an expert on geometry, which is my claim. In other words, I'm an expert on geometry because I wrote a paper on geometry, which is accurate because I'm an expert on geometry. This is circular reasoning. This fallacy could be avoided if I added the fact that my paper had been proven correct by an accredited mathematician, because then my evidence would differ from the claim itself, therefore avoiding the fallacy. And that is the begging the question fallacy. Thanks for watching.